Well, Razorback fans, there was two big commitments happen on Friday. I know it's a few days after the fact, but we're going to talk about that as we broadcast live from SEC Media Days here in Nashville, Tennessee.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I'm also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 103.7 The Buzz and 103.7thebuzz.com. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Monday, as I know it's a little bit later in the podcast, but due to SEC Media Days, we're just going to have to be turning these out as best as we can moving forward because there's a lot of fun things to dive into, especially with Razorbacks, as Wednesday is going to be the day that they actually speak in front of the big media room, which I'm kind of excited about that. But still, we'll talk about that as the week goes on. And there's a few things that we'll also talk about that happened at SEC Media Days and some questions that got put out. But what happened on Friday was pretty awesome for the Arkansas Razorback football team because they had a couple of big-time commitments coming in, and it's pretty historic, really, if you think about it. Arkansas is talking about football on that side of things. They picked up one running back and one defensive back, and both of them are bona fide four-star players. You had, of course, four-star running back Braylen Russell from the state of Arkansas commit, and then four-star cornerback Selman Bridges, who also verbally committed just 15 minutes later. And Russell was the big one. At least they're both big-time players. I'll explain what I mean. But the reason Russell was such a big-time get is because he's from the state of Arkansas, and anytime that you have big players coming from the state of Arkansas, you got to get them. At least the majority of them, because Arkansas does not recruit or at least have that much prowess in the element of the state. Like there's just not a whole lot of great talent coming out of this state, needless to say. And so when you get somebody like this, it's always big. He actually committed, then decommitted, and then recommitted to Arkansas all within a span of a few months. But I'm happy that he decided that Arkansas is his choice, and he picked Arkansas over Tennessee and South Carolina. And he did it also in Benton. So 6'2", 230, big old dude. And I think that that's a huge get for Arkansas on the running back side. And then in the secondary with Selman Bridges, this is what I find that it ends up being pretty cool. So he's 6'3", 170. He is a player that picked Arkansas over Texas and TCU. He's rated as the number 9 cornerback in the class, number 75 player overall. And what is quite impressive is that this is the highest ranked recruit to commit to Arkansas, depending on who you look at. But since Traylon Burks of 2019, and even before then, Sosa Agin, which we know how highly recruited he was. Bridges had offers to Alabama, A&M, Miami, Southern Cal, LSU, Oklahoma, Oregon, Penn State, Tennessee, among others. But Marcus Woodson was the one that was really in on him, as well as Deron Wilson, the other secondary coach. And now that is the 15th and 16th commits for Arkansas. They have eight four-star players that have officially committed, and they are ranked 15th nationally, according to most recruiting services. Now, I know that people are going to look at this and be like, all right, this is great. This is awesome, but what's the next step? What's the next thing? Like, is there some reason that we can, be excited about this? Well, of course, there could be reasons you're excited about it. Like, I don't think that's even a question. The question for me is, what is this going to do for the future of Arkansas football? Because, listen, these guys won't play till next year, at least be on the team next year. Some of them may not even contribute as a freshman. And if they do contribute as a freshman, because of the current landscape of college football, you got to keep them pretty happy at Arkansas to keep them from entering into the transfer portal. Now, maybe I'm looking at it in the wrong way. Maybe I'm over complicating it or making it too big of a deal than what it really is. But in my opinion, that is the biggest factor in this whole deal, is how Arkansas can keep some of the big-time players from their freshman classes on campus. I think it's easier said than done, in all honesty. I would love to just sit here and tell everybody that this is going to be, these players are all going to be on campus for all 3 years, and they're going to end up being great for Arkansas, and they may, and I hope they do. But it's sad that that's kind of my first immediate reaction. Was like, okay, this is great, but can you keep them on campus? Can you keep them happy? Can you keep them motivated? Can you keep them to be playing for the foreseeable future, at least until the NCAA changes the rules on transfers and how all those things are handled? So I'm very excited and motivated, and also, I guess, enthusiastic about Sam Pittman and his coaching staff's recruiting efforts for the 2024 class, especially when they're getting guys in positions of need. Secondary, cannot have enough of them. Running back, in-state kids, always need them. And the fact that they're doing it at a high clip this early in the recruiting cycle shows me that the coaching hires that they've made in the offseason, those are the right moves. I said it from the very get-go when dealing with the defensive coordinator position for Arkansas. They have to get recruiters. They have to get guys that can step in immediately and get the best players you possibly can. The scheme and all that's important too. Don't get me wrong. But right now, all you got to worry about is just getting the dudes. Because if you get the dudes, the rest of it will take care of itself. And I think they're doing that with the new coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. I feel good about the future. I really do. I feel good about the future. I feel good about what they've been doing in the transfer portal. I feel good about this upcoming recruiting class, and I feel good about this season. You know that if you've been listening to this podcast a long time, you know that I feel really good about this season. I think it's going to be one of those years that it wows people, and Sam Pittman gets back on the right track. If they go 8-4, everybody, I think, is going to be all right, good, happy. Anything above that will be just incredible. People start celebrating once Sam Pittman get a contract extension, and rightfully so. But I love the fact that they are able to pick up these types of players. One, to keep this, because twofold in this whole thing before we move on. You had a recruit in Braylen Russell who he was committed to you, then decommitted, and then recommitted to you. That does not happen very often at all. Think about any of these other major schools that have had some big-time players. I'd love to know the percentages of how many players decommitted from those schools and then recommitted to those schools, especially when it had nothing to do with a coaching change. Because it didn't happen here with Braylen Russell. That's a huge get. And then adding into the mix of this big player in Bridges, who is one of the highest rated players you've had in quite some time. Look at what this means. We mentioned how great of a player or prospect he was compared to what it was in 2019 when you added Traylon Burks, or 2018, whatever year that was. Traylon Burks and even that Sosa game. Those are great players, don't get me wrong. But you know what they were? They were in-state kids. It's one thing to get big-time players from in the state of Arkansas, because it's great, but to get a big-time player of that caliber outside the state of Arkansas, that, my friends, is an even bigger deal. So I'm truly encouraged by what the Pittman staff is doing on the entire recruiting trail. Can they keep it up? Can these guys remain committed? Can they get signed? And can they stay at Arkansas? That's going to be the key question. But kudos to Sam Pittman. Kudos to the staff getting these big-time players as we look forward to when they arrive on campus. That's for sure. Folks, I got to tell you, though, about FanDuel. Take a swing, your first swing at betting on MLB on FanDuel, and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just $20. Just $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets. That's win or lose. You're not getting that deal anywhere else. So, I mean, you could be doing it, spending it on other things that you would love to have, like more money, right? So keep betting on FanDuel. And you can bet on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. Simple as that. It's on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. And there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get up to $200 off in bonus bets. That's right. FanDuel.com/lockedon. $200 up to that much. $200 on bonus bets. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. SEC Media Day 1 is pretty much over with. And, you know, it wasn't anything necessarily big time related with Arkansas, but it was a few other things that were pretty fascinating from the extreme loud nature that's happened here at media days. I don't know who's yelling and who's doing what, but it's something that's whatever. Sorry, I got distracted. Hopefully no one's fighting. It could happen here at media days. But still, a few things, though, that did happen I thought that were pretty cool is, one, SEC Media Days here in Nashville is awesome. Like, I love the city of Nashville. It's been very accommodating, and it's a cool place to do it at. And there is a lot of different things to do across the board. And the hotel is really nice. They got it all. Also, it's not going to be held in Nashville next year. It's going to be held in Dallas. I think that is a pretty cool thing. In fact, you had Greg Sankey officially announce it in the beginning part of SC Media Days that it's going to be in downtown Dallas next year. So it's great for travel. It's great for me as a guy who lives in Arkansas because, you know, you just hop on I-30 and I'm there in 4.5 hours, maybe even less. So it's a good location for that. Greg Sankey also dove into the elements of NIL and the restrictions there because he was basically saying we got to have uniform policies across the board. But when you have states that have different rules, it makes it complicated and difficult. And it compares it to a different and unfair advantage for the most part. My opinion on the matter is that it does, like, because the NCAA is weak. They have no say in anything anymore. Let's be honest. In fact, I saw a story that Tennessee avoided a bowl ban because somebody in the state of Tennessee, like some government official, wrote a letter to the NCAA saying, hey, if you do this, if you give them a bowl ban, we're going to override it here in the state and try to have you see if you can fight it. So it's almost like they're powerless. And so now it's like when they're powerless, who you got to rely on? Well, you got to rely on congressional policing. You got to rely on some sort of way to get people to get all on board. And the way to do it is by the government itself. It's sad, but it's true. That's the way you have to do it. Arkansas is actually a really good state when it comes to their NIL policies. But if it gets to a uniform congressional deal, then it all changes. Everything goes differently. But overall, I think that it'll get done at some point. I think government officials will step in at some point and change that up. So I look forward to that. And also, with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, it's gonna open up a lot more opportunities there, especially with the scheduling. And I thought that was probably one of the more fascinating things from Greg Sankey, was talking about Texas and Oklahoma joining and how they looked at the 8 to 9 game schedule in conference play. And how he put it is, with the 8-game schedule, essentially the SEC can only protect one permanent game per team per year and then have 7 rotating. So, for instance, it would be like Arkansas and Missouri being that one permanent game that they can protect, and then the other 7 get rotated. So that way you end up playing all the opponents as much as possible in that regard. But if you move to 8 games or 9 games, then you can have up to 3 games that are protected each year for each team. So basically 3 permanent opponents you play every year, have the other 6 be rotating, and you play those teams all in a 2-year span. Each and every team you play more. So they're just trying to balance that out and figure that out. And I think with the 9-game schedule, it will happen. And I think it'll be great for Arkansas. I think it'll be great for a lot of teams. I think, you know, just considering all the stuff that Arkansas has done with their scheduling and kind of what they've been given, maybe what they haven't been given, it's going to end up being the best of all worlds for Arkansas and for the SEC. But I thought that was a fascinating thing of that's why they did the schedule the way that they did, or at least handled the schedule the way that they did. But that was really it. I mean, we'll get into some of the specific teams, but as far as Greg Sankey goes, those are the big things. They talked a little bit about sports gambling. Now they've got to get a hold on that, making sure that officials don't get involved, or like happened in Alabama baseball, the coach doesn't get involved and start having influences on gambling. Like, you don't want that at all. But overall, I think that there's going to be changes and some of those policies that are not going to really impact anything on the field necessarily, at least not at this point in time. But I will say this. Greg Sankey and the SEC are going in a tremendous direction, in the right direction. They're doing everything that they possibly can do to make this the best conference that it already is and just making it better and better. They are the gold standard. They have everything on the forefront moving forward to be the place that it needs to be in the conference that it needs to be. I know that we give the SEC a lot of hard times. I know that there's a lot of frustrations that come along with it, But I'm telling you right now, folks, it is all about it. It's all about the way it's going to be placed out and how it's going to be done. So we'll talk more about that coming up here in just a little bit. Talk more about some things that happened at SEC Media Days here in a second. So you're listening to Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So I got a kick out of Texas A&M and LSU going today and talking at SEC Media Days and some of the stuff that they had to say, which, again, it's nothing like groundbreaking, but I did get asked a few questions by people who are with Texas A&M and with LSU about that game that Arkansas is going to be going up against them. And now they're early in the season. Arkansas plays LSU in September. First SEC game of the year, and then they play A&M the next game. Neither of them are in Fayetteville. You play LSU in Baton Rouge, and then you play A&M in Arlington, as we all know. But I got asked the question of, like, okay, between those two games, though, and those two teams, who would you rather beat? If you're Arkansas, would you rather beat Texas A&M or LSU? Okay, yeah, we'd all like to beat them both. But just for the sake of variety and for the sake of the question itself, who would you rather beat? And I thought that was really interesting and a great question poised. You probably are going to disagree, and that's fine. That's the whole point of all these comments and everything that goes along with it. Folks, I'd rather beat Texas A&M. I'd rather beat Texas A&M. And here's why. One, I'm sick of losing to A&M all the time when you should have beaten them. 100%. Two, you beating LSU on the road would be great. Huge win. Maybe arguably the biggest win of Sam Pittman's career at Arkansas. But if you follow that up with a loss to A&M, it would kind of nullify it, in my opinion. So losing to LSU in the first SEC game of the year on the road, but then beating Texas A&M puts you in a better position for placement in the SEC. I think it gives you a win that you could finally shake off a little bit as you get ready for the next few games, which are going to be a very tough stretch too. But overall, that's to me, I take that game all day long. Taking that A&M game all day long. I'm tired of losing to them. Beating them in Jerry World means something. Beating them in hopefully convincing fashion would be awesome too. And who knows? Maybe it'll be the reason why Jimbo Fisher starts getting fired. Maybe it'll be the beginning of the end for Jimbo and Texas A&M, which I think would be pretty funny too. So that's who I'd go with. And again, if you disagree, that's fine. But give me Texas A&M and winning that game each and every day, twice on Sunday. Appreciate everybody listening in to Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at BuzzJohn Nabors for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel. Tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.